Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Today, we are going to be talking about prisoners in Hong Kong, more specifically, foreign prisoners. So, on my right, we have Samuel, who is a former prisoner in Hong Kong. To his right, we have Bruce. Uh, his book, Prison Letters, is what we're basing today's panel discussion on. And we also have Tobias, a professor from CUHK, who explores the relationship between religion, being in prison, and sort of the intersection between that. We also have Michael Vincent, who is a broadcaster, and we'll be hearing more from him as well. So before we start, I want to come to Samuel. Since you're the former prisoner and you actually have experience of being inside, what's sort of the one perception that you had before going to prison that was sort of broken once you got in?
For me, before I went to prison, it was a time in my life whereby it was one of the darkest moments of my life. I just had a son, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have a purpose. I was not doing anything basically. That's the time that I seek for asylum, and I was on the waiting. So I was really in a dark space, and that has really led me to do so many dark things in my life. I was drinking and all of sort. So then that's the time that I had an issue, then I had to go to prison. But my perception about prison was, yeah, I was scared. I was thinking it's a place that could, could I would meet people that would probably involve me into more dark things and bad things and all of that. But when I went to prison, it was quite different because I get to meet people and we get to share our most vulnerable moments. And also I got to meet people from outside who comes to visit, especially the Christian organization like the Consent. So in that moment, I felt I had hope to redeem myself, to, to give my life a chance to change the things that I needed to change, especially, like I said, I just had my son. I wanted to be a better father, and I started to read books and start to build a relationship with God.
And could you briefly tell us why you were in prison in the first place?
Yeah, I was in prison for drug trafficking. Like I said, I just seek asylum, and in that moment, I was not doing anything, and I think because of the fact that I was idle and didn't have a purpose, so I started going off track, and unfortunately, I found myself in the wrong hands.
Coming to Bruce, your book, Prison Letters, explores multiple stories of what it's like to be in prison. Why was prison life something that you wanted to explore in your book?
It's quite a good question. Actually, I didn't start out with any intention to write a book such as this. In fact, if you give me about 5 minutes, I can give you a little bit of a story, how it happened. I was basically, around the year 2000, in between vocations, looking for things to do at that point in my life. And in my bucket list, one of the things I didn't do was go to church. And I had time, and I said, well, maybe this is something I should start to look at. So I started going to St. Joseph Church in Central, sitting there in the back and listening. And what touched me was the music. At this time of the, say, 1980s, 90s, praise and worship music was starting to become very popular. And they're musicians, like the same as rock and roll musicians, gigantic musicians. And the music really inspired me. Also at that time I saw in the church, the choirs, and the church is filled with domestic helpers, all playing music all the time on a Sunday. And so I decided, really on the spur of a moment, why not play this music on Sunday night on the radio? Because I knew they all listened to radio on Sunday night. Michael Vincent here has a wonderful program. It's been on for years called Philippines Tonight. I knew that all listening to Metro Plus. So I went to see Michael, and we booked an hour to play praise and worship music on a Sunday. So the program started on Palm Sunday 2004. And I must remember I was quite terrified that night. I had prepared 13 songs to play, which would take up the whole hour, so I didn't have to say anything. But eventually I had to say anything and look into the microphone there and started to say a few words. Now I'm on for 21 years, and I can't stop talking once the program starts. So it's completely different. But anyway, what happened, I started playing praise and worship music, and then all of a sudden the phone rang. So I picked it up, and it was a domestic helper calling, and she said, "Brother Bruce." So all of a sudden I became from Bruce to Brother Bruce. And then Brother Bruce, I said, "Yes, what is it?" "I have a prayer request. My daughter's taking the nursing board exam tomorrow." And I said, "Okay, I'm not a priest or a pastor, but I can pray, ask all the listeners to pray for her as well." And then a couple of weeks later, she called back, about 3 weeks later, "Hallelujah, my daughter passed the nursing board exam." I said, "That's great, that's faith. You know, we put it into the air and someone heard and God's listening, so the prayer was answered." Well, then my phone had about 4 lines there. It started lighting up like a Christmas tree. And all the prayer requests started coming in. Prayer requests, most of them were from helpers for financial breakthrough, but also people in the hospital, traveling, you know, endless number of prayer requests. And then what happened, the ones that were answered, they would call back. So all the good news came, prayer answered, prayer answered. The ones not answered, they were sort of pending for a while. So the program became very popular because of that. And I had learned in some of my reading that the power of music, of praise and worship music also. And while we were doing it, I heard that a Filipino priest who visits the prisoners, I bumped into him one day and he said, "Bruce," I was back to Bruce then with the priest, not Brother Bruce. So I said, he said, "You know, all the inmates are listening to your program." I said, "Well, that's great, write to me." So they started writing me letters, and I did a calculation in preparing for this talk. I think since, conservatively speaking, I've received about 7,000 letters since the year 2024. I've got boxes and suitcases full of them. And then there was a priest, Maryknoll priest, Father Adam, a good friend of mine, who was a supporter, and he said, "Why don't you, I've been reading these letters, why don't you publish them in a book?" I said, "Oh my God, that's going to be really hard." The hard part was, how do you choose the letters out of all these letters? One is, you know, there are all kinds of different letters. So finally, though, he kept pestering me, "You must print this book." So I went to the Christian Faith Publishing in America, and they printed it. I chose the letters there that we would start with, and that's basically where I'm at today. So through the journey, I've been on the air now about 1,100 Sunday nights since the first one, and prisoner visitation became a very big part of the program. Just to give you a brief situation of what happens. I received MP3 messages. Last Sunday night there were 33 from families, because in Hong Kong they only can make a 10-minute phone call every month, you know, for a foreign prisoner. And I think I was focusing on foreign prisoners because they don't have any people here, no family, no visitors like that, so they're in a little bit different category. Yeah, so I can say a little bit more later.
Coming to Tobias, could you briefly explain how your work relates to prison life? You explore religion, how that plays a role in those that are in prison. Speak a bit about that.
Well, I mean, mainly my role is that I'm a prison chaplain. I'm deeply grateful to the CSD that I have been given a prison chaplain's pass in 1998, so that's 27 years ago. I had been a prison chaplain before that in Switzerland, and I just have this long-standing relationship. And I mean, throughout all the ups and downs of past years, and so I do deeply appreciate that the CSD still allows people like me to go in as a chaplain. I guess they see that I cause no harm, and what I do is basically I'm a low threshold counseling opportunity for the inmates. So they receive counseling, they receive encouragement through me, hopefully, or that's what I do. What I do is basically I visit, I have access to all the prisons in Hong Kong, but mainly I go to two prisons, Stanley and Sek Pik in Lantau, occasionally to other prisons, and I enter and I visit all the workshops, all the day rooms where the people are, and I talk to them, say hello to each and everyone. I mean, it would like going around, say hello to everyone, and if ever there is someone who I have the impression needs some more encouragement or some more words or asks me some questions, I would then talk to him. And often these are short encounters, 1 minute, 5 minutes, if it's longer, 10 or 20 minutes, but I would see a few hundred inmates in a day, but then I would talk maybe to 40 of them, 50 of them, and have some more meaningful encounter. And basically the bottom line is that I try to give them encouragement and tell them that even though they are going through a difficult time, their life is meaningful, their life is precious, and there is a time, obviously, that they will be outside and they should prepare themselves.
For Michael, you get messages into your show.
Yeah.
Is there one challenge that you think is common among the prisoners where you get messages? Is it the fact that they're lonely? Is it a lack of connection to the outside world? What stands out to you?
Well, first and foremost, my connection to the panel is basically I visit through the help of the Philippine Consulate, our radio program. We have 4 ethnic programs on Metro broadcast. We have Filipino, Thai, Hindi, and Indonesian. So predominantly, we all know that the majority of the ethnic minorities here are Filipinos. They're the biggest lot also inside prisons. So every year until 2018, we were going to, together with the Philippine Consulate, to visit them every Christmas, specifically with the women's correctional, because that's where most of them are. So we visit Lowu, and we are given the opportunity to be really close to each other. We bring a Filipino band there. We really celebrate Christmas. And I think my experience is how an individual would sort of reflect on what they have done, but be in denial on the early stages. An example to that would be drug mules, wherein they get sentences between 10 to 25 years, depending on the load of whatever illegal drugs they brought in. So you'll see that in the first 2 years of the visit, you'll see them sitting down at the corner, just with head down and not joining the fun, right? Because they're still in denial. As that progresses, you will see them being more interactive, and they will tell you their stories that, oh, I didn't do this because of this, right? And then you'll find out, in the long run, you'll find out that their stories weren't true in the initial stage. They've actually done this several times, but in this particular time, they got caught. So you feel that you end up to create a sort of an interaction with them because they listen to us on the radio. So we sort of link them on Christmas because we kind of hush do some things that they send us their family numbers from the Philippines. And then we give them their Philippine families there a call. Then we broadcast their greetings, which Bruce does it now. But on the initial stages, there was no mobile phones or WhatsApp to send all these MP4 messages, right? That's what we used to do. And they would respond to that after. And you'll hear them while they're writing their story on how they heard their families, sending messages of love, affection, how we miss you and all that stuff. You know that they're breaking down while they're writing that story in a dim light of what they can see just from the outside, because there's lights out inside. And you can see, in spite of that, In the book, you'll see, their penmanships are perfect. They put so much emotion in every story and every letter and every sentence that they put. I think that's the most significant thing I've felt. And it still continues. Unfortunately, now that they've been pushed to Lowu, the signals of broadcast from the mainland is really eating up. And they're only left with one small transistor radio, which they can buy in the concessionary, right? One really small transistor radio, and that's it. So,
Like that.
yeah, and what would they normally do is go close to the window in order to can get that signal. But they try as much as they can possibly can to get any information from the radio. And that has been enhanced by Bruce's program, 2 decades.
I actually had a follow-up question on that denial aspect. It seems like they're almost going through the 5 stages of grief, in a sense. How often is it that they actually admit what they've done, or is it a sort of continued process where, and I think Tobias can also chime into this, do they never admit their crime, or do they actually live in a denial that they're innocent?
No, in fact, as the progression comes in towards their sort of going back home, you see that their smile in their faces is a smile of acceptance. And in fact, some of them, the male prisoners who have gone back home to the Philippines, they still are in constant touch because we broadcast live on Facebook, and they significantly tell us their story on how they are right now. I remember there was one who actually took 3 courses, meaning that he studied inside. Right? He found sponsors to sponsor him. He took 3 courses, and now he is a well-known businessman in the Philippines. So it's really that, and you can see how it goes. And then the happiness on our part is that when you don't see them anymore, the next year you visit, because that means they're back home. And that to me is the epitome of happiness on our part, because you see that, oh, finally they're home, they've accepted the fact, and they're back with their families.
Well, not all accept the fact. I mean, some people, probably, I mean, the judiciary is a human institution. There may be some wrong judgments, but I mean, people tell me mostly probably they are guilty, but it's a fact, not everyone can admit it. For some people, it is too big a thing to admit it. And, but I would say the majority deals with it and admits it. But what is maybe important is that at some point, it's not the most important question. I mean, it's maybe for us outside, it's important. Do you admit your guilt? And particularly for those on a life sentence, who are, in murder cases, they are on a mandatory life sentence. They have at some point to admit that they have done it, otherwise the long sentence review board would never release them. But for people on a large group of inmates who are there on long sentences due to crime of drug transport, trafficking, some of them throughout their time in prison, they would not admit it. And it's not my interest to push them. And I would also emphasize that there is a life. What I appreciate or what I emphasize is that their life consists not just of their misdeed that they possibly did or possibly not, but there should be other aspects of their life. And we should not reduce them to criminals. That's why I don't talk about criminals. I think this word is deeply problematic, because if we talk about criminals, it gives some essential nature to them, kind of like they are criminals, but they are people who committed a crime, possibly, mostly, probably. But we should always be aware that it's not the black and white reality. For me, this is a very important part also of this letter writing, of all these activities that kind of bridge this brutal kind of division between those inside and those outside, because this is a artificial division that is common in most societies around the world, but it creates this image as if the bad people were there inside. But of course, there are a lot of bad people outside. You may know some of them. They may be sitting here or elsewhere. And the notion of there are bad people and good people is obviously a wrong notion, because we are always a bit both. And we also know from psychological studies that, the famous prison experiments, Milgram, the Stanford prison experiments, that people under certain conditions can become very bad people. So it's not that there are good people and bad people, but people in certain circumstances do wrong things. And so for me, what is always important when I talk, not to the inmates, but to people outside, that we should be aware that this is a social construction. Prison is a social construction which artificially divides between the so-called bad people who are inside and by consequence, the so-called good people outside. And I welcome every activity, be it the radio program or letter writing or so, that bridges this gap. Yeah.
Samuel, I think that's a good segue to our next question for you. Outside of once you got out of prison, how difficult was it to sort of adapt to normal life? And how would you say that experience in prison helped you moving forward? Because obviously you have to rebuild your life after that.
Yeah, for me, I was, like I said, when I went to prison, that's when I encountered God. So that's when I started building a relationship with Him. That's when I started reading the words of God, which really helped me and comforted me throughout. So when I went out, I wanted to search more for that God that I encountered in prison. So I contacted Christians outside, especially the people that had visited me, the organization concerned, just to thank them and, for their visit and all the programs that they helped us go through. So I continued my search for God, and when I started going with the Christian community, it kind of helped me more to live my life easily, to transit from that prison walls to outside walls, which they helped me in terms of the programs they offered. And some of the programs they offered was like weekly, every month we have like 2 weeks Bible studies, we have hiking and all of that. And they connected me to different type of groups that helped me to engage me so that I won't feel that loneliness again, or I won't feel that me not having a purpose. So it was quite easy with their help, and that has really helped me to really integrate. And yeah.
Coming to Bruce, within your book, you also speak about how there are also drawings in the book. How surprised were you that if you want to go ahead and show the crowd actually.
Okay, well, all right. Slowly,
Yeah.
go through it there. There's handwritten letters and beautiful letters. And what the letters contain, though, is heartfelt messages of people who find themselves in a very unusual position, because loss of freedom is already quite a lot of punishment for people. Their life changes completely, like black and white, night and day. And they find that, in the worldly ways, people who are in prison, they are there to be punished in a way. But in the more spiritual world that people come to, because they really find God and friends there, they feel they're looking for pardon more than punishment for some things that they've done. And I found that in their letters, they speak of the transformation that being in prison has done for them in their life. Something that people would be terrified about. I mean, this would be one of the things I put on my non-bucket list of things to do, go to prison. However, those who have had this experience, and usually it's not wanted, there are tremendous benefits, pardon me, to be received by going through the system. Because in the prison, it's like an international UN there. You find yourself dropped in with people all over the world, different languages, different faiths. We have our listeners to the program, of course, are Christian, Catholic, Muslim. When Ramadan comes around, we honor the Muslim faith, Buddhist faith. We keep track of everyone in prison there, because the linchpin of their getting through this. Of course, they'd love to come out today. They're forced to stay there, but they realize that they cannot come out. So they have to make themselves deal with the situation and come to the terms. And they all do that by helping each other. For example, if you're in prison and you are not in touch with your family, and yet there's an emergency, someone dies and you're in prison. It happens. The sentences can be very, very long. I mean, even for ladies, for example, they can be sentenced to 15 years, and say if they're 30 years old, well, it might be they lose an opportunity to have children in their life. There's a lot of ramifications that we don't think about, and the real sideline of it is the people that they leave behind. So many inmates that we have right now, they're worried about their children. Maybe they smuggled drugs for money, got caught. Very stupid, of course. They don't realize then the sentences they're facing are very, very long. But then the whole family suffers as well. So there's a big knock-on effect there that happens. And what they do in the letters is they pour out their hearts pretty much and make the letters very interesting. So I think the book has been made almost like a coffee table book. There's a lot of letters, and some are very small print. They're hard to read. You may need a magnifying glass. But it's a selection of letters that is broad. I didn't pick out really the best ones. Some are well written, some not so well written. But I think that reflects the reality of the prison situation there.
Coming back to Samuel, I also had a question about sort of, is there ever a silver lining once you're convicted to a crime? Like today, if you were to apply for a job, what's sort of the reaction that you face? Because if it's on your criminal record, how do employers react? How do your friends in Hong Kong react? What's sort of the initial reaction that you get?
Yeah, for me, like I said, I was already seeking my asylum, so I was not able to walk throughout. But when I get out, and like I said, I just associate myself with the Christian family and go to Christian events and all of that. For me, I was free to talk about my story, and I didn't feel any judgment or judgmental towards that. I was okay. I felt they welcomed me, and they welcomed me with open arms, so I didn't really feel any type of
So there was no real stigma.
yeah, I didn't feel any stigma. Yeah.
Tobias, I wanted to ask you, you obviously, as a prison chaplain, interact with all kinds of people. Do you think there's a stigma towards them once they come out and perhaps they want to get a job or rebuild their life?
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, I would say overall the inmates, or the released inmates, they do usually cope quite well. They find somehow a job within their circle. There's a lot of mutual help. I know a lot of networks of ex-inmates who actually help each other out to find a job and so on. But I mean, there's definitely a stigma attached, and certain jobs, I mean, for instance, government jobs, I think you cannot get anymore. Many, I think, I'm not in the business field, but I think it's quite standard that an employer would ask, do you have any record? But then, of course, there are other stigmas, like many countries would ask when you enter the country or when you apply for visa, do you have any criminal record? And then the big question is, should you lie or should you not lie? I mean, it's very simply Japan, a very popular country, has this statement, and I have heard people who then told me they lied, but then they felt terribly bad, so they don't want to go back into that situation. And so yes, there is a stigma, because you are constantly reminded that this will stay there for many years. Yeah.
And I mean, Bruce, you referred to the entire book. You also have a radio show. What's your take on that?
Well, the radio show, it's the content. It's called Prison Visitation on the Air, and it streams live on Facebook. 7:30 to 10 is the prison visitation. 7:30 to 9, and then Hour of Love is praise and worship music until 10. That's when it's lights off in the prisons also. But the content of the hour and a half, which we need more time now, is letters that we receive, a lot of live telephone calls. I get a telephone call every Sunday night from Johannesburg, from America, with short messages to my son or my daughter in prison right now, because I think the benefit of the radio program, it allows people to communicate with people inside the prison instantly. They all have their little radios. I have a captive audience, I call it, every Sunday night. They're there, they look forward to it very, very much, because you don't have a lot of alternatives there. So the program has become very, very important to the inmates, and then they reflect that, and it's become very, very important to their families. Because MP3 messages, we see like over 30, they're a minute or a minute and a half each, in all different languages, Russian, Spanish, a lot, Portuguese, wherever the prisoners are from, African languages there. And the person who sends the message, which we must receive by about a Thursday so we can have it on the radio on Sunday, they're happy and they're pleased that they can give a message instantly to the inmate there. With communications is very, very important. So that's why we call it, if you go to visit a prison, the prisoner in Stanley or like Tobias does, how thrilled they are to have a visit, particularly outside people who come to visit. They love that and they look forward to that very, very much. It makes them feel that they're not forgotten, that people still care about them. And so through the radio program, though it's instant every Sunday night, it's available to any prisoner to do that. So I think that this has been a blessing that we didn't realize when we started it.
Michael, since you interact with a lot of foreign prisoners, mainly of Filipino descent, what's your take on this? Because they're already an ethnic minority. On top of that, they might have the prison tag on that as well. How do they cope with this when they're looking for employment and looking to rebuild their lives?
I think one of the things that is really support. There's a lot of NGOs that, especially coming from religious organizations, that have sort of splinter groups that visit different correctional facilities in Hong Kong. So that in itself is a plus. Though the interaction is through a glass window, just to have someone visit and to say how he or she is makes a whole lot of difference. In fact, let me just tell you a story. If you all are in business, networking is a must. I think that's for everyone. In the correctional facility, it's the same thing. When you receive all these greetings from them, you'll see they know who the new people who are coming in, from the women and the male. Then they're already they're including them in the greetings of all those people that they previously greeted. So sometimes it's fascinating how they actually are able to get the names of these people, why they're inside, considering that they're from different correctional facilities in Hong Kong. And what amazes me is they will, let's say if there was a Filipino who's a new inmate, they will mention that already. Oh, can we add this person? She's new, she's from this particular correctional facility. And before even the visits of the NGOs, they already make that person feel she's part of this family of network of greetings within the male and the female group. So I think that in itself, like what Bruce was saying earlier, there's already that connection, regardless of whether you're new or you're old in the correctional facilities. You have that connection. They will not leave you as far as everything's concerned. And that's the beauty of it all. The Philippine Consulate visits every quarter. They try to go through the different correctional facilities. Sadly, most of the biggest number here are the female. And most of them are either in Thailand or in Lowu.
Coming back to Samuel, I wanted to know, what are the conditions like in prison? I mean, I'm sure it varies across prisons in Hong Kong, but the one that you were particular in, could you describe a scene of what it looked like?
Yeah, I was in Tung Tau, which is a white hand prison facility. So the conditions there are quite easier than the rest of the other facilities. And because I was a non-smoking prisoner, so I was privileged to watch TV till like 10:30, and yeah, the food was good. Not good, but at least it was better. Yeah, so yeah, I was lucky that I went to a good facility compared to the other facilities, which according to the other prisoners or other inmates, they complain about the other facilities. But for me, I was privileged that I didn't experience that.
But I mean,
In terms of every aspect, whether it's a bedding, whether it's a freedom to kind of communicate, and you know, we kind of have a little bit of privilege because it's a white hand and it's for offenders.
Tobias, you've also visited prisons as a prison chaplain outside of Hong Kong. How does Hong Kong compare to other countries in the region when it comes to prison conditions, and how like strict the sentences are?
Okay, good question. Yeah, I did visit prisons in most of the countries of the region, and I would say Hong Kong's strength is that it is very safe environment, very well managed. It's very correct. I mean, in terms of abuse or so, there is. I mean, imprisonment is anyway tough, but I mean, it is well run and it's fair. I mean, whether you are rich or poor, you have the same treatment. That's great. But it is a very punitive system compared to other systems. For instance, the biggest contrast would be Philippines, which is extremely crowded, extremely poor living conditions, but it's not a punitive system. So the warden in the prison in the Philippines could go around and mingle with the inmates, dance with the inmates, and wish them good morning, family. And there is a kind of a cordiality there, and which is quite unique. And so similar in Cambodia, I've been Taiwan. Taiwan is quite strict. Singapore, if I would have to compare it to Singapore, I would choose to rather stay in Hong Kong. Hong Kong prisons, this is interesting. I mean, in terms of parole system, Singapore prison is quite good. In terms of all the other aspects, I would think Hong Kong system is better, is more humane. In Singapore, you are basically locked up in a room and you get your food on the ground floor, shoveled in to your cell in a very demeaning way. Of course, you have furthermore death penalty and corporal punishment, the caning, and so on. So it's in many ways amazingly bad. But what I don't like, there are a lot of things I do not like in the Hong Kong prisons. I could talk a lot about that. But of course, that's my perspective from outside. I would like to have more activities that bridge the walls, the gap between inside and outside, have the inmates get more opportunity to have for overseas nationals phone calls or for more visits, also physical visits. In many places you would have, for instance, in the Philippines, but also elsewhere, you would have family, even in South Korea, in some places in South Korea, you would have family rooms where you can gather as a family, where you can have a sexual relationship to your wife or your husband. So these are things I would always encourage the CSD, but obviously we are there on different pages, but it's good. They talk to me and I talk to them and they're respectful to me. Yeah.
How have the rules in Hong Kong changed over time? Like, how often is a prisoner allowed to call his loved ones?
They haven't changed much for the 27 years that I've really been regularly go in and out. In regard to phone calls, there was a progress from a significant progress from 10 minutes in 3 months to 10 minutes per month for overseas nationals, which is extremely short. And we still hope that, taking into account modern facilities, that they would have an access to free kind of phone calls. They have to pay. They have to use these phone cards. They pay a lot of their salary for these expensive phone cards. There's a lot of room for improvement, but there are a lot of security concerns, and I have to respect that. But the conditions have stayed very much the same actually over the years, which is good and bad in a certain way.
And Sammy, what's your take on that? Do you think there's anything that can perhaps be improved moving forward from your experience?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of things that should be improved, especially with the communication. For me, unfortunately, I didn't communicate with my family members back home, especially the first 5 years. 5 months. Yeah, it was really hard because I was having someone that was visiting me in Hong Kong. So, and also I think, yeah, they can improve more, especially with even video calls. Probably those are things. But the communication is kind of one of the key things that really is kind of held in back.
If I can,
Before
if I can
we
add
sort of
something.
open it up to the audience, I had a question for Michael. Um, since you've also visited, have you visited prisons in the Philippines?
No, I haven't. Most of my visits were actually here. I think we've run that for almost 9 years, visits every Christmas. It's a great feeling because we're allowed to be closer to them. It's not just through a window. It was really interacting with them. We brought in some musicians also, a complete band. We were normally designated in areas wherein it was a basketball court, right? So, because in the previous visits that I had in the earlier stages, it would be based on the where they actually, the category where they are. So we were placed only in a small classroom. But as I think as things progressed, the correctional facility, the people in charge sort of laxed everything a lot easier, so we were able to come in. But towards 2019 and of course pandemic, that totally stopped. And in fact, we wanted to go back sometime 2023, but they were a lot more stricter as bringing in some people from outside. So they sort of checked in on who were coming in. It was not as lax as before. But it was a great opportunity to sort of mix and mingle and get to interact with them and know their stories firsthand.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay, there's a couple of things I think that I would like to mention that you asked Samuel regarding things that might the prisoners look at. From the letters, there are some big things and some small, but communications is very, very important. Like in some prisons in America, for example, they have a bank of telephone calls, bank of telephones. You can collect someone anytime that you want, provided the other person will pay on the end. Some kind of a system like that. Prisoners look for more telephone call communications. On a small thing, though, there's monotony in the prison. If you look at the snack menu, it probably hasn't changed in dozens of years. So if you're eating the same snacks all the time, there could be something. I wouldn't know how the Correctional Service would do that, but that's one thing that the letters bring out. They also say the Correctional Services is very professional. The people there are really good. So the environment generally is very healthy in the Hong Kong prisons. And the last thing, though, is for good behavior. A lot of them, they have reviews. For example, they have a 5-year review, then every 2 years review. And I was thinking the best thing that could happen in the prison system through both for the inmate and through the correctional services to bring up morale. Say, for example, if you had 5 years, you have no complaint against you, you should have some remission. It should almost be given to every inmate, in my opinion. Like, say, for example, you're sentenced to 10 years. After 5 years, say you had a perfect record, you get 6 months off. That would be wonderful. Such an incentive to the prisoner himself and to the correctional service officers, the whole society. Say then 2 more years go by, you get another, say, 3 months off. Then 2 more years. After 9 years, you'd have 1 year remitted. And this, I think, this is what's lacking in the system. And this is what a lot of the letters show. That reward for good behavior would be very, very beneficial to the society.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to open it up to the audience. A member of staff will hand you the mic, and yeah, thank you.
It's not a question, it's an observation. I mean, everyone who's sentenced to anything other than life can earn a third off his sentence for good behaviour. And that's something they're told immediately to go in because they have their EDD on their cards. So that's there. I would agree, perhaps in principle, that people who do more should get further reductions in their sentences. But it is there, and if they break the rules, they lose remission. And that's a very powerful deterrent for an awful lot of people to stay on the straight and narrow.
Hi, my question and comment was to Tobias. I'm a Singaporean. Thank you for your advertisement for my country's legal system and the harsh punishment. And I'm very glad that, please tell everyone that you know that Singapore's punishment is very harsh and the prison is very harsh, so that when people travel to there, if you board an airplane flying towards Singapore, 5 minutes before arrival, there is an announcement telling you that drug is of, if you carry drugs, that's of capital punishment. Yeah. So I would love you to do more of that so that the country can have less of unfortunate people caught in the net. But my quick question was, your comment on the good and bad people that is actually very blur
Yes.
boundaries or borders.
Yes.
Then, if we do not have a very clear concept of good and bad,
Yeah.
what is the use of the legal system? And what is the use of the law enforcement? And what is the use of many lawyers in this room? And do you think that they should play a bigger role or a smaller role? And final question is, if we cannot use criminals, what is the better word that you will suggest? Former inmate, a former convict? What kind of words is more neutral in a way that we can use it on media?
Yeah. Maybe I start with the end terminology. The CSD uses the word, which I think is good. They simply use the word people in custody, which is kind of functional, general. I would say, yeah, people in prison, people in custody, whatever. I think this is not a way that is not labeling them. So well done, the CSD, in this regard. The other point is really a good point, and I'm aware of it. And I do blur because I don't think reality is black and white. I think that's what we have to live with. And within this reality, which is not black and white, we have to find ways to be still clear that certain behaviors are punished. And I mean, I'm struggling. This is really a philosophical question. I think it is right to have that certain acts in our society carry certain consequences, including imprisonment. But then having people imprisoned in my opinion, should not mean that we should treat them in a demeaning way, whether in Hong Kong or in Singapore. And so in this regard, I don't think, I do very much disagree with your promotion of the Singapore model, because my opinion, and I think it's supported by social research, that harsher punishment systems are not the reason for reduced crime. Typically, of course, also with the death penalty, but this is huge, another topic. But the issue with this black and white issue, I really think that we should be aware that, and we should promote this view, that it's not simply bad people in prison. People in prison, they have done possibly, mostly, some acts that are regarded as criminal and are punished by sentencing in prison, but they can be very good people. I've met a lot of very good people. I have at the same time met quite a good number of quite bad people, or I read about them outside. And they are not criminals, but crime is also something that is historically grown. I mean, typically speaking, nowadays a large part of society, of penal population is in prison because of drugs. Drugs have been kind of penalized in a certain period in history. That was a social choice, okay. But it's not something that is kind of intrinsically given. Yeah. Emily.
you. I'm Emily Lau of the Democratic Party, which will disband next month.
But you're still.
Someone said to me quite a while ago, he said the test of whether a place or a country
Yes.
is civilized
Yes.
is
Yes.
the way they treat the people in custody.
Absolutely.
So, is Hong Kong a civilized place? The second question, because religion kept coming up, and the Catholic Cardinal of Hong Kong, Stephen Chow, was in Australia not too long ago, and he was asked whether we have religious freedom in Hong Kong. And he said, Cardinal Zen has not spent one day in prison. Mm-hmm. So I guess he says that's why there is religious freedom. Mm-hmm. What is your take on that? Thank you.
May I answer? Yeah. Well, the first point is Hong Kong civilized? I think, comparatively speaking, to the region, I think Hong Kong is doing well. And I have my points of criticism. I don't want to be too explicit on that. I'm in dialogue with the CSD, and I always appreciate the dialogue with the CSD. But there are areas that could be improved. But overall, they are very civilized in terms of equality. And I think in this regard, really, they do an excellent job, that no matter what is your position in society, you may think yourself of who I'm talking about, your treatment is the same. And that's a great achievement, I think. Now, the other question regarding religious freedom, what I usually tell people when they ask me, I say, well, I mean, that me as ethnically non-Chinese, also in terms of passport non-Chinese, but the Christian ordained pastor can go in and out of prison without any restrictions is it's not just an enormous privilege, but is also a sign that religious freedom is still given. It's also, I would also say that in terms of the overall environment of we can freely practice religion, worship, there are no restrictions. Of course, there is politically speaking, you can say there is an increasing outreach of people from the liaison office to get us into some kind of united front and so on. But this is a kind of an attempt to increase the understanding of the motherland, and not my motherland, but local people's motherland, and so on. So there are certain approaches towards more united front activities. But overall, religious freedom, I would say, yes, it's granted. And personally speaking, I mean, that's when I talk to people outside of Hong Kong and share about the situation. I always think, I mean, I'm coming from Switzerland, but my view is that actually the way Hong Kong is portrayed in the West is worse than the reality. So I do not support I try to usually tell, yeah, there are a lot of things that are not as good as they could be, but it's, I don't push for this negative viewing of Hong Kong. Yeah.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one is for Samuel. As you mentioned earlier, you were seeking asylum in Hong Kong, and as we know that asylum seekers in Hong Kong are not permitted to work. So I was wondering, if you were able to work in Hong Kong, would you, through like legal, to make a living through legal means, would you still have gone into the bad path? And to the rest of the panel, since you know the, sort of the demographic and why people, got into custody, to what sort of extent are there asylum seekers who sort of, were pushed to the edge because they couldn't make a living, and then ended up doing the wrong things, and then somehow made their life worse. And is there anything you would recommend the government of Hong Kong immigration to do to resolve this problem? Thank you.
Yeah, for me, before I leave the Gambia, I had a degree in planning and design. And I also work in Gambia in one of the biggest company in Gambia, which was a GSM operator. And also I had my own company. And I came to China. I wanted to do my master's, but unfortunately, I couldn't complete it. I was back and forth between China and Hong Kong. So yes, if I was allowed to walk, of course I wouldn't be into, I won't do something that is illegal and finding myself into a bad crowd. I would have done better.
Sorry, I just want to clarify about my second question. I'm not trying to imply that, asylum seekers are, tend to break the law, because I actually have someone who's very close to me who's an asylum seeker, and I see how his life really suffers because he can't work. And so, as we know, Hong Kong is one of the world's toughest jurisdictions in granting asylum, which I personally think is really unfair. And I feel like, I don't understand why the government is doing that, but I want to sort of, from your perspective, if you could share, like, if there's any way we can make things better for these people as well.
Samuel, do you want to take that?
Yeah, it's giving us a chance to walk, yeah, that's basically that. Give us a chance to walk, do something and contribute towards society. And I think that's very important, because I feel everybody has something in him to impact society. Like, for example, right now, like I said, when I get out, I make sure I surround myself with the Christian community, and they've given me opportunity to be among themselves, to participate in the things that they're doing, and I feel I belong there, and I do things of God and also in the community. Like, for example, there was one time that we were going around there was this park in Chanchipo where there are normally addicts. They normally are there. We normally go there, share the word of God and distribute food and all of that. So yes, we can do something in society and contribute in society. And also I'm into this dance group called Dance to the Nation. We normally do YouTube videos at the same time. We go to different church to perform. And also we do this Hong Kong Day of Prayer, whereby all the Christians in Hong Kong come together and pray for like 12 hours. So yes, we can contribute a lot in society if we're given a chance to.
Let's take one last question.
Samuel, a question
Yes.
for Samuel.
Yeah.
My name is Bernard Murphy,
Yeah.
and I'm with the NGO Voice for Prisoners. So me and my group, we do prison visits. The question I have for you, Samuel, is you mentioned about your life and how you evolved through your Christian faith, and you're talking about the communities that you now are part of. What about those people in your previous life, shall we say, those people who maybe were not Christian, or family and friends back home? How do you relate to them now that you have found this deeper Christian faith? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start with my family. Before prison, my relationship with them was really not good. But when I came out, my relationship with them is much better. We communicate more, and one of my brothers is a pastor. And along the way, in building my faith, I communicated with him more, which previously I was not communicated with him. And now, thanks be to God, I'm baptized last month due to my journey of searching God and all of that. And yeah, it impacted in such a way that, the videos, like I said, the videos that we do, I share with them. And also there is this YouTube videos that I normally make and share with my friends and family and loved ones.
Okay, unfortunately, we'll have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much to the speakers. Thank you, everyone, for coming as well.
Can I just make one comment
Yeah,
as well,
go for it.
since we're closing? I'd like to thank everyone for attending also. It's great to see everyone, some good friends, and all members of the club. And on this topic like this, when the clubs said, the book will be available here, but why don't we have a talk? I said, well, it'd be interesting to see what the response would be, because it's a prison, something that's sort of off the radar of most people's lives. And so I really appreciate everyone coming to the talk today. And I think if you do purchase the book, some of the letters here and the drawings will be, they tell a story as well that we can't possibly cover today in an hour and a half. There are some brilliant things there, but I think it reflects the humanity of people in this situation, how they help each other out through all different circumstances. When somebody is down, they have some kind of a tragedy, everybody rallies to support them, and it's returned reciprocal through the time that people spend, sometimes long years, waiting for their freedom. So, thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you did well. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Well, we try.